This is the second video on histograms. Looking at the table of information in your screen, we have here is information showing time taken for people to complete an online survey. So for the first row, you can see the frequency is missing. So I'll just leave it as a question mark. That's something I need to work out. But we have got a bar. If you look at the histogram, you can see I'm shading the bar that represents the first row. Right, the second row of information, the frequency is available, but so is the bar. So that is useful to us at the moment. The third row, you can see the frequency is missing, but the bar is available. Right, so at the moment that row of information is not very useful to us. And the fourth one, the fourth row, the frequency is available, but the bar is missing. So we should have a bar going from 35 to 70 on the x-axis. There's nothing, there's absolutely nothing there. So that is a bit useless to us. So it seems like the complete piece of information that we have is the second row. Why? Because we've got the frequency. If you look here, we've got the frequency and we've got the bar. So what I'm going to do now is use that second row for my calculation. Now if you look at the screen, your screen on the left hand side, we've got the triangle. So whenever you've got a histogram question, please draw the triangle. That'll be useful to you. So looking at the second row, we have a frequency of 3000 and the class width is 20. Now before I proceed, before I carry on, what I want to do just very quickly, I'm going to add on a second column. It's the class width. So 10 take away 0 is 10, 30 take away 10 is 20, 35 take away 30 is 5, and 70 take away 35 is 35. So we're looking at the second column, second row rather. So we've got the frequency of 3000 and a class width of 20. So looking at the screen on the left hand side, what we need to do now to work the frequency density, do 3000 divided by 20, which gives you 150. So the frequency density is 150. Let me just write that down there. Frequency density is 150. So this bar, which I'm shading in yellow, has got a frequency density of 150. And remember, the y-axis, the vertical axis, represents the frequency density. And that there, that yellow one, that yellow bar, happens to represent 150. So what we need to do now is determine where to put the numbers along the y-axis. Well, if this yellow arrow is pointing at 150, clearly that means this is 100. Let me just get rid of this. Over here is 200. 300. So we got our numbers along the y-axis, which was missing. So the whole point of using that triangle is to determine where the values need to go along the y-axis. So what we can do now is fill in the missing pieces of information. So looking back at the first row, we have frequency which is missing. So I'll put a question mark there. So now looking back, so if you look at the screen on your left hand side, look at the triangle. We've got frequency which is missing. I'll put a question mark here. frequency density over here, just shading that bar over here, that's got a frequency density of 100. So frequency density is 100 and the class width we have is 10. We'll put the 10 over here. So what we need to do now is to work at the frequency, you do 100 times 10, which is 1000. So you can put the 1000 there. So now that row is complete. We don't need to do anything with the second row because we've already got the bar there and we've got the frequency. So now looking at the third row, the frequency is missing, but we do know what the class, do know what the frequency density is. So looking at the third bar, which I'm highlighting on the screen for you, that third bar has got a frequency density of 400. So now we can use our triangle. So back to our triangle again. So to work at the frequency, which is still a question mark, the class width happens to be 5 and the frequency density is 400. So now what we need to do is 400 times 5 to get the frequency, which gives us 2000. So third row is now complete. Now looking at the fourth row, the only thing that's missing is the bar to represent this row. But what we do have is the frequency. So back to our triangle again. Right, so we have a frequency of 1750. The class width is 35. So what you need to do now is divide top to bottom. 1750 divided by 35 gives us 50. A frequency density of 50. So now we need to draw that bar to represent that row. Remember, the class width is 35. It's going from 35 to 70. From 35 to 70, which is over here. And it's going to have a height of 50. Now what you need to do is really be using a ruler. Right. That there now represents, that bar represents the fourth row. So now what we have here is a complete histogram and a complete table, all the frequencies labeled. And what we also have is the y-axis, which was originally missing. We've got all the numbers along the side. So that question now is complete.